There we go. All right, I think we're live now. Hey, Scott, how's it been?
I'm alive. This is Tech Conception.
Mhm.
That's the YouTube channel that didn't ChatGPT come up with this name?
Yeah, it did. It did. We were looking for like cool names for a YouTube channel. We talked about some of the things we wanted to look at. I can't remember what words we fed it or so. But yeah.
I was trying to brute force our our skin color or the fact that we were a minority into the name of our channel, and I think you pushed back like, nah, let's not send that message. Um,
Yeah.
but we wanted it to be a channel where we would have a open conversation about business with an emphasis on technology applied
Mhm.
to it. And it's usually always, I won't say it's always, we always talk tech, but lately I've been going full throttle into business concerns or considerations. And I think with you and your crypto saga or solutions, that you've kind of been focused on that as well as your past experience with managing development efforts, focused on prioritizing the business over engineering
Mhm.
coolness. So
Yeah, I totally agree with that because I think it just comes with age in this business, right? Because if you remember when you started, when I started, um, all I could think about was the code, right? What's the HTML? What's the this? What's the that? What's the tech? What kind of backend are you running? What tools are you using? Oh, are you using the latest .NET? Those were all my concerns, um, coming up, as a software engineer and everything. But what something happened, I think that was like 5, 6 years ago, when I started to realize that your tech doesn't really mean much, right? Because the truth is, the best tech isn't always what wins, right? More often than not, it's how well is the how well is the product in terms of product market fit, right? Facebook was built on PHP for crying out loud, you know. Now, granted, it's not your grandpa's PHP that Facebook was running at the time. They made a lot of advancements to PHP to make it scale, at Facebook scale. But at the end of the day, what made Facebook successful had nothing to do with PHP, right? It had to do with the experience, it had to do with the business idea, it had to do with so many other things. So I think that perspective is something that once you get, you start realizing that, oh, maybe I should not focus too much on technology. Is great. We've been there, we've done that, we get it, right? Especially at this I think you are more than 10 years, right? You're up to like 15,
20,
20. No, I mean professionally, like you are being paid as a software engineer.
20.
Jeez, man, you're my senior then.
I started my career in I started as a co-op in, I would like to say, 2001.
Damn,
No, it could have been 2003. So, no, I
damn.
think it was 2001. No,
Sheesh.
it may have been 2003 is when I started. No, hold up, 2003. I think it was 2001.
Wow. Okay, I'm impressed now. Uh,
Yeah.
okay, so for me, I started learning like web design right around that 2001 as well. But I couldn't say I was a programmer per se. I never understood JavaScript or anything like that. In fact, I remember downloading in 2003. I remember downloading a C++ compiler and I was totally lost, right? I could only just do file new project and run the samples, and that was about it, right? There was this thing, is it dev C++ or so? Very long time ago, but I wouldn't call myself a developer. I think I became a developer in 2005 when uh, Visual Studio 2005 came out. Because I remember before then, I had actually downloaded .NET 2001. Was it 2001? The .NET came out in
I think
2001.
it came out in 2001, and it probably had like 5 CDs,
Yeah, I remember. I remember.
including J Sharp.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Okay,
Uh,
so I think what happened was it was in 2003 that I got .NET. It was also in 2003 because 2003 was my first year in university. That was when I got introduced to many of this stuff. But I had been doing web design long before that, so I'd been doing like HTML, CSS stuff um, back in secondary school. So yeah, um, but I won't call myself a developer until 2005. 2005 was when the momentum started to move. Like I understood how to, construct very simple applications. I was, dangerous. Um, and then I, 2005, that same 2005, I did an internship where I worked on, do you remember Windows Compact Edition?
yeah, it's a framework
Yeah.
that I never select, right? I thought it was for embedded. No,
No, no, no, no. Compact edition was, they also used it for embedded, but at the time it was what we used for PDAs and smartphones. There wasn't even smartphones, I remember. It was just PDAs, right? They called it a personal digital assistant. These devices that had like touch screen on them and stuff like that.
Palm Pilots.
No, the Palm Pilot was a phone. I'm talking about this thing wasn't even a phone. It was compact or something.
Okay.
Yeah, so crazy stuff, sha. But I remember working on that. I was an intern, I was trying to learn, that was also the time I started with Ubuntu. I started like learning about Linux and stuff like that. And back then, Linux was so messed up that you couldn't like plug a flash drive into it and get data out. You had to plug the flash drive and then run some commands to mount the flash drive as a volume just so that you can just so that you can see the contents of the flash drive. Crazy times. But yeah, so I know I like to deviate a lot, but the I I did that in 2005, finished school. When I got out of school, that was like 2011. That was when I now started working for a company. That's when I can say, okay, I started my professional life as a software engineer, being paid to write code, not toy projects or stuff like that. Um, but like I said, 5 years, 6 years into my career, that was when I now realized that, hey, there's more to software than just the lone programmer who is really good in the basement coding something up, right? You have to know how to play office politics. You have to know how to work with other developers. You have to know how to leverage the skills of other developers. You have to know how to balance the egos in a team, right? Stuff like that. You have to know how to work with higher ups. You have to even know how to look at um, the code you people are building for the business. Is it bringing value to the business? Because I will tell you right now, no matter how good you are, if you're not bringing value in a company, they could even axe your entire department. It has happened so many times, right? They can act, they I've seen, you see companies axe an entire division. Uh, so long story short is that was when I got interested into the business side of, software and engineering and tech and so on and so forth. And you know, I have just been learning. I've been on that journey. It also didn't help the fact that, once you are a little bit good, right? All your friends who have crazy ideas will be like, "Hey, Scott, there's this idea. I'm telling you, it's going to be the next big thing in Silicon Valley, and I want you to come and build it." And you're like, "Okay, do you have any
And
funding? Do you have any money?" They're like, "No, no, I'm telling you,
and
you will
and I'll
take."
give you 50%. Right. Uh, and like I'm usually not interested in what idea they have. I don't care. I mean, this happened to me like 2 weeks ago. This dude was like, "Hey, I got this idea." And it's like, check it out. And you can take your beach delivery app and like port it over to my idea. It's going to be mad successful. I'm like, okay. He's like, so down here in Miami. So I'm in Miami, right? Down here in
Hmm.
Miami, they have these boats and yachts, and they hang around these keys, and they party. You know, they have strippers on their boats, and they have a good time. But they leave all their trash on the keys, and you know, they just start like just trashing the key. A key is like a very small island,
Mm.
and like just litter everywhere. And so, hey, what if you write this app and this this app, like the people that are like having sex with strippers and partying on the keys, like they can say, "Hey, come pick up my garbage,"
Oh wow.
and I'll get a notification, and I'll say, "All right, I'm on my way," and I bring over like maybe some jet skis, and I anchor the garbage on the back of the jet skis, and I dispose of the garbage for 'em. And yeah, we can make that a business. It's going to take off because I know this news network guy on TV, and he talks about the problem all the time. I literally, this was the pitch I heard like 2 weeks
Oh
ago,
my god.
and I'm like, people that are partying with strippers, having a good time on their yacht, they don't care about someone picking up their litter. They don't care.
Yep.
One is it's not even going to scale. Like, how much money you plan on making?
Hmm.
I don't know, but it's going to be a lot of money. I'm like,
Who's going to pay?
how many people you think are going to be trashed off of coke and liquor are going to say, hold up, let me pull out this app and have some people pick up our garbage. So
Yeah. No,
I need to
I,
change. I need to change people who I hang around.
I,
'Cause
I,
it's not working.
I see that all the time too. And in fact, because the platform we're working on, the crypto platform, it makes things even worse because now you have situations where someone will give the exact same pitch, but would say, "Oh, we could also use AI and blockchain to tag each of the trash and to know how to blah 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 and get carbon credits and it's like, ugh."
That's another one. Blockchain. I went to a meetup group. I went to a networking event like 3 weeks ago, and I was aggressively seeking a co-founder. So I was just walking in to the bar, walking into people's huddles as they're like talking amongst each other, and I'll just say, "Hey, what do you do? Yeah, I'm looking for a co-founder. Hey, this is what my business is. Blah blah blah." And like 80% of the people that are at that networking event, this meet and greet, they were all working at blockchain, quote unquote.
Damn.
And I'm like, this one dude he was like, yeah, I'm using blockchain to connect musicians with like record labels.
Oh god.
And I'm like, so which part does blockchain address? He's like, it connects musicians with record labels. I'm like, I thought blockchain was like, I thought the advantage was for it to decentralize, you know, parties.
Hmm.
So there's like no central authority.
Hmm.
Like, I'm curious how that I'm curious what problem you're solving that requires blockchain
That AWS
as
couldn't fix, right?
and he couldn't give me an answer, but the fact that it was blockchain, it was worth investors. So
Yeah, it's crazy, but 99% of blockchain companies are going to die.
I would
99.
argue that I would argue that I would argue that block 99% of blockchain is dead. Now this is very ignorant,
Okay.
right?
Hmm.
But there it's had I would argue more than 10 years or close to 10 years to address um, one of Earth's problems, and it hasn't really taken traction on addressing problems as a solution. What it has had is media focus, and it's created some millionaires, and it created some people that have gone bankrupt.
True.
But it hasn't addressed, I don't think, a societal need for something that really needs to be solved because it's too painful for us right now. I don't
I
think it's done that.
I can give you an example.
Okay.
I can give you an example. Do you know the amount of red tape it takes to send $100,000 from the US to, say, Nigeria, for example.
A lot, because I don't think most banks that are US are
Mhm.
going to entertain that.
Exactly. And it's not even just the amount of red tape involved. It's also you're also looking at the time it will take, right? If I do a swift transfer, it takes almost 24 hours, right? Meaning that any transaction I want to send money, maybe I want to send money back home to my parents or stuff like that, you know, it takes a while. Now, there are applications I currently use that allow me to do such things, right? But those applications come with counterparty risk. And one thing the blockchain does very, very well is it allows you to do that transfer without having to worry about, uh, in fact, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you're done. Anywhere in the world, regardless of who. A better way to think of blockchain. In fact, you know what? Let's not look at blockchain as a whole. Let's break it down into two parts, right?
Before you go into that part, though, I said traction, as in mainstream, and it's not mainstream.
So I will also answer that question as well. Um,
Okay.
I think part of it too is also the fact that I have a unique perspective on this because I'm coming from a country where blockchain is very, very popular, right?
Okay.
Yes. So in Nigeria has the highest amount of P2P transactions in the world by far. It's not even close. And that has a lot to do with the unique situation that the country is in. In the West here, I would argue that the only reason it hasn't gained traction in the West is because, quite frankly, you guys don't need it, right? Here, if you there is already so much financial technology around the stuff you use on a day-to-day basis that the value proposition of blockchain is almost zero. So most people who are here saying, "Oh, I'm going to invent this new platform with blockchain, blah blah blah," they're all full of because I don't know if if I should be allowed to curse, but maybe I'll bleep it out or something. But the reason is that you people don't need it. So, for example, in Nigeria, it is very popular because the government plays pranks, or the government is constantly messing with the finances of the country, right? So one of the things that they do is they try to block. In fact, it's two
Block
way.
Twitter.
Yeah, exactly. You remember they blocked Twitter. Aside from even blocking Twitter, right? They put limits on how much you can spend. So imagine I wanted to buy something from Amazon, for example, in the US. I could always order it, but there's a cap. You're capped to $100. I think that cap was even reduced to $50 because there is a lot of we don't trust the government because we don't trust our government, and our government is fond of messing with things. So many Nigerians move all their assets to crypto because that's the only asset that they can easily like transact, send money abroad, all those kind of things, receive money without all the scrutiny or all the I won't say scrutiny, without all the uh, prejudice that comes with being Nigerian, because there's a lot of prejudice. You can't buy anything without, credit card companies getting flagged, without, even when I was in Nigeria and I was doing legitimate work, right, for companies in Switzerland and so on, sending me that money was an absolute pain, right? So you can imagine that, you know, countries like Nigeria, countries like China, countries where there's a lot of government tyranny in quotes, right? You have things like blockchain or blockchain powered solutions are going to help um, people in those countries get value from the Western world, for example. That's just an example of one of the value propositions. The second value proposition that the blockchain does is that in terms of financial investing, there's a problem. And it's ironic that there are a lot of exchanges, and those exchanges are antithesis of the whole point of blockchain in the first place, right? If we go back to the very beginning of Bitcoin, Why did Bitcoin even exist, for crying out loud? It existed because someone got fed up of the fact that the banks were messing with people's money, and then the governments came and bailed them out. And then he realized that no, we need to have a form of money that can be verified, regardless of having third parties. I will give you an example. Let's say, for example, you bought, I don't know, you decide to invest in silver. Silver is a physical good that exists, right? The only way you can buy silver today is either you go and buy huge blocks of silver by yourself, or you you uh you go register, you buy shares or REITs or some kind of financial instrument that represents that silver. Does that make sense? That's how you would essentially keep track of it. But the problem is that you are giving counterparty risk. How do you know that the company has the amount of silver they say they have? How do you know you're not speculating, right? So, and the only way to know is if you had something like a blockchain that you can use to verify that, okay, yes, indeed, I have 20 bars of silver, right? Um, Bitcoin, on the other hand, is exactly like that. But the advantage that something like Bitcoin has is that you don't need any third party to verify that you have the crypto you say you have. The perverseness of the crypto space came with the likes of the exchanges, right? Who hold that money on your behalf, and because of it, they can, like in the case of FTX, they can tell you, "Don't worry, deposit your money with us. Your crypto with us is safe." And then you deposit your money, and then they run away with it, and you don't even know, and you're busy trading on the platform, and they're using it to do loans and all those kind of crazy stuff. So that's my long-winded answer of saying two things. One is, international situations for money transfer and so on and so forth. And two is, verification of assets, right? So if you have something, you should be able to verify that you actually have that thing. Um, and the third one, which is also weird as well, is you have I've lost my train of thought. Anyway, but I don't know if I made any sense, my whole rambling.
No, I mean you did. You said that it's tailored or based on demographic that where it's more mainstream than other demographics. So you say United States, it's not, but in places like Nigeria, they're constrained to use that type of technology in order to perform transactions abroad. So
Yeah, yeah.
I
So in
get it.
fact, speaking of which, that's kind of what the blockchain platform that I'm building, my passion project, right? Is it's not just me. We're like three or four other guys working on it at the same time. But one of the things we are trying to do is to look at how can we give, how can we rebuild the entire financial system that currently exists in most of Africa, but build it on top of blockchain, right? And bring most of the things that we take for granted here in the West, things like, oh, you can take a 30-year mortgage easy, right? And because there is a history, there's a track record, there's a credit score that they can use to say, oh, this person is trustworthy and this person is not. Um, Even things like counterparty risk. So every time you make a purchase on anytime you make a purchase with your credit card, right? If something goes wrong, um, you can easily uh, where's my train of thought heading with this? But there are a lot of things that are taken for granted in in Europe or in North America that you could port over using blockchain, right? To um, places like Africa and so on and so forth, and then bootstrap the rest of the financial system to bring them up to speed with with the kind of financial sophistication that we have here in the West.
Got it.
Yeah.
I know crypto is something that I never really got excited over. Besides making money.
Mm.
So yeah,
No,
but
but the technology itself, right? So because me, first and foremost, I'm a technological person. In fact, the first time I saw Bitcoin, it was not impressive to me. Um, because I had looked at the technology, I tried it, I noticed that in terms of transaction speed, it was far slower than um, MasterCard or Visa or whatever the case may be. And immediately I wrote it off. But what I did not see is that blockchain technology or Bitcoin is internet native, right? And I think that's another good way of thinking about it is you have this technology that is part and parcel of the way the internet works. Why was the internet successful? It was successful because anybody with a modem, right, could just connect and get access to the same services regardless of where they are anywhere in the world, right? Um,
Well, that's not true, but okay.
okay, like,
It's not true.
okay, like, what do you mean?
Like China.
Well, okay, so here's the thing with China. You're correct, but you have to also remember that things like VPNs do work in China, right? So there are ways of bypassing the government restriction if you wanted to in China. But yeah, China is the exception. But look at the
Well,
okay.
you're more than likely more knowledgeable in that area than I am. But just take into consideration that at the end of the day, there's literal like lines on the ocean floor that countries manage. I mean, United States, I was under the impression owns the internet, right? Um, and during times of scandal or espionage, like things can happen to connections to other countries.
Mhm.
So it's still infrastructure that is an asset of of a country, I would argue, and it's not something that is ubiquitous like oxygen. Like if the United States government or the Chinese government decided that they wanted to disconnect you or they just wanted to disconnect an island or a region, in theory they can. Now there's a counter argument that well with Skylink, you know, the satellites above that can mitigate it and that's fair, but I'm not sure if that is mature yet. That's
So
all.
so
I should be a lawyer because I just like
no,
countering.
no, it's a good thought experiment. But let me explain to you why that doesn't really work, right?
Okay.
The reason why it doesn't really work has to do with the way the internet itself is designed. So here's the problem. Let me explain. Let's say you are a government, right? And let's say I am trying to bypass your tyranny in quotes, right? As long as you have some kind of connection to the outside world, there's always a way to bypass you. That's just how it is. As long as you did not completely, they call it air gapping. Have you heard about air gap before?
No.
So air gap is the idea that you buy a new version of Windows or a bunch of computers, you install Windows on it, and then you network all the computers, but you don't let anything from the outside world touch those computers. No flash drives, no Wi-Fi connection, nothing.
Is that this is a stupid question? Is that also called a landline or what do you call it back in the '90s where people used to have video game
LAN
parties?
party, yeah, LAN party. Exactly. It's kind of like
Okay.
that. But the reason why you have that air gap is, for example, if you wanted to store top secret information, right? So I can
Uh-huh.
imagine that, really, really powerful corporations that want to keep like backups or the US government and they don't want people to hack them, right? They would have that kind of air gap systems to put government secrets in. Um, because the moment you have even Wi-Fi, right? Some hacker somewhere is going to find some very clever way of getting through, of getting it, right? So, point is that unless you have an air gap system, right, which is maybe the government of China physically goes through and cuts all the cables to everybody on the outside world. So, unless you completely detach yourself from the internet, right? As far as there's a way you can connect, there will always be a way to bypass. And part of the reason is that the way internet protocols are designed, they are all failure proof, meaning that if one of them goes down, right?
It's not true.
Wait, wait. Let me
Here's
explain.
another.
Let me
Okay,
explain.
okay.
Let me explain. Let me explain what I mean, right? In the sense that take DNS for example, right? The way DNS is set up in such a way that when you go to .com, the .com itself is just a bunch of servers, and those bunch of servers are every time you go to say google.com, right? Those bunch of servers will respond that yes, google.com exists, but we don't know where google.com is. But we can refer you to these other DNS servers, right? So that your DNS query has a way of fanning out through the system. Do you remember last year? Was it last? It was last year when Facebook went offline, right?
Yeah.
Good. Now Facebook went offline because they misconfigured their DNS and it took out their core DNS for Facebook.com. But even then, even though it took out the core DNS for Facebook.com, Facebook was still online for another like 6 hours until all the DNS entries, um, until all the DNS entries expired. And the reason for that was that the way the network routes are all set up, if it tries to query through a particular through the normal machine and that doesn't go through, it will try through other nodes on the network, right? And as long as there is a path all the way to Facebook server, those connections will still be made. But as time goes on, right, it gets they because what they did was the change they made slowly took off all the servers offline. But anyway, I'm digressing. The point I'm getting at is that no single machine, there is no single point of failure, there is no single cable you will cut that will take out the entire internet. That's not how the internet works. You would have to cut every connection to a particular service to completely cut off the service from the internet. Does that make sense?
It does.
So as long as you have somewhere there is some kind of connection, the only difference what will happen is that the packets will route through a very long cut. So maybe the packets will have to route all the way to Europe, down to Australia before coming back to South America or something like that. You get what I mean? So from that perspective, right, that is how the internet is resilient. And now, remember what I said earlier that Bitcoin is internet native because as long as you have a node on the network, right, you can't completely eliminate Bitcoin or blockchain in general because as long as there are nodes in the system and those nodes find a way to communicate with each other, it doesn't matter. Does that make sense? Because taking down, even if you like when China went and banned most of their miners and most of their mining operations went offline, right? Bitcoin was still fine. And the reason why Bitcoin was still fine was because the way the network is set up, some other person will pick up the slack, you know.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for the education.
Nah, no problem. So,
New topic.
yeah, new topic. What do you think?
I've been marinating on the idea that throughout my career, I've always resented being forced to be a team player
Mm,
at the with the cost of sacrificing my, I guess the standards that I hold myself to, right? So I don't know. I feel like you have a couple interviews early in your career and they tell you no.
mm,
But those interviews that you had were painful and you remember exactly what questions you stumbled over and you say, all right, bet. So you start researching, you start practicing everything that was exposed. Um, and so your next interviews, you get asked those questions and you go into Wikipedia mode or you go into chat GPT mode and you give a dissertation, right?
mm,
And so you basically build up this armor of for lack of a better metaphor of knowledge. Anything that organizations expose when you're asking them permission to be a part of their organization and solve interesting problems? They say no, because you couldn't answer these questions. So you go back and you figure out the answers to those questions, and they stick. All right. Sooner or later, you get past the interview, you get hired, and then you realize that your peers or your coworkers, they don't demonstrate the the barriers that you had to get through in order to get a job with that organization. They don't demonstrate it because some of the issues or challenges that you're now facing with that organization to try to solve problems, it seems as if they're not on the same page. It seems as if they haven't even faced those types of questions before.
Mm.
So those data structures, those algorithms, those provide me an experience where you had to deal with XYZ. Feels like those questions were only geared towards you, and it wasn't geared towards mainstream like people that are already there that you were trying to work with, right? Make a long story short, you start building up all this knowledge based on everything that the world has exposed that you didn't know. And then you get to the point where you start developing like this competency, this confidence that, yo, I really know my stuff because I've been practicing and I've been failing and I've been applying armor to everything I failed with or to. And then you start realizing that, man, they didn't let me in because I wasn't smart enough. But now that I'm smart, I feel like now I'm supposed to dumb myself down so that I could be a team player. I'm supposed to lower my standards of engineering and professionalism because people aren't at my level because they weren't forced to get to the level that I'm at for whatever reason,
Mm.
right? Um, so I dwell on that thought, and I thought that that's just the way it is. But the more I start consuming these YouTube videos or these Y Combinator content, the more I'm starting to realize maybe that, nah, son, it's really just the enterprise or these normal organizations that are mainstream that it is what it is where you have to lower your standards if you were forced to be a beast at what you do just to get in, just so that you have to dumb down your skill set. But if you really embrace competition, if you really embrace winning, and for whatever reason, whether it's insecurity, whatever it is, you like to enforce superiority over other people because you feel like it is a competition, you feel like you practice and you want to be recognized, then nah, F that. Don't be a team player. Focus on the startups, right? At least with startups, like it's kind of do or die, right? There's no participation award at startups, I don't think. And I mean, I'm it's highly likely I'm speaking from ignorance because I haven't sold a company that or a business that I've built. But the more I start like just consuming all this content on my runs and just while I'm programming, listening to these YouTube videos on startup lifestyle and the expectations, the more I'm realizing that maybe I could still maintain my standards of engineering, professionalism, and always aspire to get better versus, no, Scott, calm it down. These people, they're okay, and we prefer having happy developers, even at the risk of not really continuously improving and generating profit or reducing costs for operations. And I'll pause right there, but that's kind of the revelation I had is maybe I should have spent the last 20 years focused on startups and not focused on
Enterprise.
enterprise.
Well, you are right in the sense that enterprise for starters are very, very risk averse, and that makes sense. Um, but there's another way I want you to look at it. and it's something that of recent I've had like some, like, should I say, some change, a change of heart in a way. Um, Programming is a team sport, right? So it's not necessarily how good a particular player is. Is how does that player, what's the dynamics between the player and the rest of the team? I don't know if you watch soccer because I don't watch basketball, so I can't really tell. But in football, right, in soccer, the team, I love Manchester United a lot, and Manchester United is, it used to be a great club. So when it was a great club, Cristiano Ronaldo played at that club. You know Cristiano Ronaldo, right?
Don't watch soccer. No.
Oh, okay. So Cristiano Ronaldo would be like,
Tiger
hmm,
Woods, LeBron James, Michael Jordan.
so it's trickier because there's only one LeBron James, right? And there's only one Tiger Woods, and um, there's only one Michael Jordan. But it's akin to, there are two of them. There is Messi, and then there's Ronaldo. They are both elite players. When I say elite, I mean TPT top, best of the absolute best, right? But um, um, Cristiano Ronaldo got there by hard work, right? So Cristiano Ronaldo grinds like nobody else. Like he's on another level of grinding. He optimizes every single thing he eats, right? Um, and he trains like there is no tomorrow. And you can tell that he's this type of person that goes above and beyond, right, to achieve excellence. You have Messi on the other hand, who is a pure artist, right? Messi is, it's almost like Kendrick and J. Cole. If I'm to come up with a similar should I say rivalry, right? So you have J. Cole who is very good, he's elite MC, right? But J. Cole had to work to get to where he is. Whereas Kendrick, who is also an elite MC, is just naturally talented and gifted, like just off the jump. Um, Anyway, so you have Messi, you have Ronaldo. Now, Ronaldo is slightly older than Messi. Messi is the talented one, and they are both talented, but you get the point I'm getting. Anyway, so Ronaldo played at Manchester United. He was part of the, when Manchester United was like really, really good and everything. And then he left Manchester United, only for the club to slump and became a mediocre club, and only for Manchester United to actually bring Ronaldo back. So you can imagine a situation where Ronaldo is this A-level elite player coming and playing with this set of players who are good, but they aren't great. They aren't on his level of greatness. And as they play matches, he gets more and more frustrated to the point where it's even, there are rumors that even in the locker rooms he will come and just like really shout at all of them and all those kind of things, because you can imagine, because Messi on the other hand has always played for elite clubs. So Messi has never been in a position where he has to carry the team by himself, because everybody who is playing on, or at his level somehow. So it's easier for Messi. But with Ronaldo, it's just frustrating. And why do I say this? I'm bringing this up to say that sometimes it could even be the companies you are working for. Does that make sense? It could be the companies you are working for.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm not working for fan companies.
Yeah, as an example. So it can be frustrating when you are working with people who are perfectly happy with mediocrity, right? They don't want to put in an ounce of work that isn't directly tied to their appraisal or something like that, right? They aren't willing to even be curious about design practices, for example. They only care about the there and now. And to some extent, I kind of respect that, right? If you're someone who has a family, you have a mortgage, you want to really just, you know, punch in the clock and get your shit done because you have a life and all those kind of things. I can't be totally mad with that, mad about that. But
And the interview process should reflect that.
exactly. But at the same
Don't
time,
don't don't hold me to a bear. Don't hold me to a standard where I have to interview at a certain level, right? I have to demonstrate a certain type of competency to get through the interview. And
Hmm.
then once you open up the gates and you let me in, the interview does not model the work ethic,
Yeah.
right? Or the
Hmm.
actual like type of work. Like,
True.
F
True.
that. Oh.
So, but yeah, in that case, you're actually right about that, one of the things that I have even been thinking about is um, being a senior developer, right? There are two ways you can make your contributions valuable as part of a company. One way is to pick up everything and do it your own way and muscle through and you know be that level of excellence and show that you are operating at that level, etc., etc. But the downside with that is, you get to this situation where you have to bump heads with people, or you get to this situation where you yourself is starting to burn out because you are having to carry a lot of the do a
It
lot of
doesn't
the
scale.
yeah, it doesn't scale, right? But the second way, which is what I am starting to learn and realize, is if you are operating on a higher level than your team, um, you should apply this principle I'm about to say. It's something that I saw a long time ago, which said, don't raise your voice, improve your argument, right? And
Hmm.
what that means is that, but it's something to remember, but it has limitations, and I'll tell you one of the limitations later. But what that means is instead of forcefully moving the ship in the direction you want, right? Maybe you can get better by adapting your ideas in such a way that it gains momentum, not just with yourself, but with the people you inspire. Because in any company, if you're a senior developer, there will be developers that look up to you, that will be like, we know, as far as .NET is concerned, Scott is the guy, right? If you are able to build that momentum with them, build the patterns and practices and the ideas, and tell them why, and make it in such a way that improves those developers. What will happen is, over time, you start to grow a tribe in your organization, and that tribe would even speak for you, even when you don't have to speak, right? If someone else is doing the wrong thing, right, they'll be like, no, this doesn't really make sense because we do it this particular way, and this is why we do it this way, and this is how it works, right? And but like I said, there's a limitation to that. The limitation to that is, back to what I said earlier, if you're dealing with people who just don't care, then everything falls flat. But if you're in a company where there are a lot of people who want to learn, and there are, like, should I say, junior developers in your team, your role as a senior is not even to try to do the heavy lifting. Your role is to build in the patterns, the practices, the culture that would empower those junior developers to actually go ahead and do those things the right way. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying. I just don't think that that works in reality. I think
Mm,
that reality is humans tend to work towards the path of least resistance. If if they don't have to, usually they won't. And I believe that you need to be in a position of authority and to be able to demonstrate that you can deliver solutions that are sustainable in order to achieve the type of results that I think you're expressing. Um, I've I just don't have faith that people want to do the right thing.
mm.
This is why we have governments in the first place. We have governments for a reason to enforce that expectations are met,
I,
right?
I,
To the
I I get that, but look at how the government does that enforcement, right? The
hmm
government isn't. So, for example, when the government wants to remove money from the system, they aren't going to people's bank accounts and using their force to remove the money from the bank accounts. Instead, what they do is they just tweak the interest rates, right? So tweaking the interest rates, changing the incentives, right, forces people to do certain things. So people are surprised why tax codes are very, very complicated. They are complicated because the government is using incentives to coerce people to do the right thing, even if they don't want to do the right thing. So you look at the fact that, okay, for example, a government could tax tobacco, for example, to reduce the amount of people that are smoking, right? Without necessarily forcing people with their might, to not smoke, without outrightly banning cigarettes as an example. So you have to think from that particular perspective as a leader or as a engineering manager or something like that. How what mechanisms,
What
what
strengths?
yes, what situation, what constraints can I put on the system that would make people do the right thing? I'll give you an example. In my former company, when I was in cyberspace, right, one of the things they were doing a lot, which was absolutely disgusting, was they would go directly into the server, install Visual Studio on the server, and then run the app. They would kill the web app running in IIS and just run the app inside of Visual Studio while it was live, just so that they could step through and debug maybe an issue or whatever in production. And then the app would be down for most customers and people would be complaining and all of that kind of stuff. And it was nasty. And for the longest time, because they wanted to still keep that ability to debug things on the server, they used to use ASP.NET websites as opposed to deploying a ASP.NET application with DLLs and stuff like that. And the reason they were deploying websites was just so that they could go to the server and tweak things on the server, and it was nasty and disgusting. And the first thing I remember, one of the managers in the company at the time, the first thing he did was he after like they had like 4 or 5 outages because a developer went and edited the server and things went out of whack. He just came in and said nobody should. He first changed the password of the main server, right, and just gave it to one person, and then denied access to uh, uh, people who wanted to just go and edit the website, and forced everybody to change over to ASP.NET Web Applications. And what happened was, all of a sudden, people had to adapt to that new environment, right? You know, um, they had to now start writing properly, testing properly, not relying on the fact that they could just deploy the source code to the server and change it. And as time went on, right, when I now became a senior engineer in the company, one of the things that I did was to say, you know what, nobody should even be able to deploy code by themselves to the server, right? Moving forward, we're going to have a build pipeline that you set up the build pipeline. Once you check in code into master, it will build it and deploy it. So even the access to the server was completely removed. And boy, did I get pushback. I got like epic level grade pushback because it was like, you're taking this thing away, you're preventing us from doing our work. What if blah blah blah, and so on and so
Yeah.
forth. And I had to go on this whole, tour of explaining to them that taking away these permissions from you also takes away the liability of when something goes wrong, right? I had to find ways of turning the argument to show how it benefits them. And that was the only time that it got adopted in the company. So that's an example of things that, if you're clever enough, you can do to effect change in enterprise organizations. But the truth
Yeah, it
of the
kind
matter,
of changes the definition of being a developer. Like, I
yeah.
mean, it seems like there's some diplomacy that I think I said it on Jamie Edwards' show that man, you got to have a political science degree now to be a software engineer. Uh,
But it goes back to what I said, right? It's like that because it's a team sport. No big, no valuable and big, important software is built by individuals. It's always built by a team, right? So at the end of
mm,
the day, the
it's
value,
always maintained by a team. It could be spearheaded by an individual, right? No.
even if it's
So,
spearheaded by an
so
individual,
what's the dude's name? I can't. Linus Turbo. How do you say his name?
Linus
He
Torvalds,
he
yeah.
he 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 didn't spearhead that. He
So
wrote it with a team,
so yes, he has a team. So I'll explain. No, I
maintained, or did he spearhead it?
okay. So let's have our definitions a little bit clearer.
Okay.
A developer can a lone developer can influence large projects. That is not news. Whether it's Python, whether it's Ruby on Rails, whether they have like specific developers who they call them benevolent dictator for life (BDF). Um, uh, those BDFLs. Those guys are the ones that have huge control over how a platform is built or how whatever is built. But remember, but the point I'm making is that 80 or 90% of the code isn't actively written by Linus Torvalds. In fact, what he does most of the time is code reviews, right? So,
You're talking about today.
but that's kind of my point.
Okay.
That's kind of my point in the sense that where the Linux kernel was when Linus first wrote it is not where it is today, right?
I would argue that the way he wrote the code was writing the architecture or the constitution that was so well done that it was able to be sustained to this date.
I agree. But
Okay.
but again, back to what I said earlier, right? Even if I give you Linus Torvalds, I give you Notch. You know Notch who wrote Minecraft, right? He wrote it all by himself. I give you, yes, there are developers that do spectacular things from time to time all by themselves, yes. But the majority of software isn't written that way. Those are the exceptions, not the rule. Whether it's Windows, um, um, uh, whether it's so many systems, whether it's Mac OS, you know, is usually a team of people. Now, that team could be a small team.
I mean, you could say it's usually. I don't think that the way that status quo is right now doesn't necessarily mean that that's the way it should be, right? So,
Yes, but
for
okay,
example,
okay.
for example, on past projects, I'm
Mhm,
like, I'm the lead or I'm the architect. It is going to take a considerable amount of effort and time
mhm.
for me to explain or hurt these developers to write the architecture that is going to sustain um, uh, business feature development. Okay,
Mhm. Yes.
so I'm like, I'm Scott Nimrod. Let me just bang this out. Let me bang out the architecture, and then once I put in this infrastructure or the scaffolding of code, then developers can come in and they can start building out their business features.
Mhm.
And at a high level, I think that that works. Um, what I don't think will have the same probability of success is having a development team or development teams all say, "Big bang, development starts now.
No,
Everybody,
no,
let's
of course that
let's
doesn't
build
work.
this architecture."
Of course that
No,
doesn't work.
I think there has to be a visionary
Okay.
to
So let me
get the
rewind
ball rolling,
let me
and then
rewind
people
let me
contribute.
rewind my
Okay.
statement. What I mean is it is rare, if not impossible, to have any important software that a single developer would wake up, write the entire source code, build it, have a version 1, and deploy it, right? Without any external help whatsoever. The reason why that is rare is because most software is much more complex than your Hello World or your simple address book solution, right? It's
Yeah.
usually multiple systems all intertwined, right? Now, somebody, maybe one or two people may come up with the entire architecture, but at the end of the day, other people have to pitch in for this system to be born. It's not
Oh,
the
for it to
idea,
scale. But
yeah,
yes.
yeah, the
Yeah.
idea of having the lone developer working in his mother's basement and building the next big thing. It's something that happens very, very rarely. I think the only exception, the only recent one is even Bitcoin itself. So Bitcoin itself is an example of one that Satoshi just came and just dropped the source code of the entire thing, wrote the white paper, wrote the application, deployed it, people started using it, and Bitcoin was born. Full stop.
I don't think it's been proven that that was written by one person. But
No,
okay.
no, I'm just giving an example. Like I'm talking about
Uh,
that kind of big bang, palm, I just woke up and I invented this thing out of thin air and it's the thing that takes over the world. It doesn't happen that way. Instead, what tends to happen is somebody comes up with an idea that's not fully fleshed out. He does an initial design, like Linus Torvalds, for example. He just did the kernel itself, right? Other people like Richard Stallman and so on came up with the GNU Linux. So they built other things. They built the Notepad. They built the user space. They built the mail. They built all the other things that an operating system needs to work. So rolling back, why am I bringing all this up? Is that once you realize that you need to work with people at some point, regardless of what you are building, you it's going to happen one way or the other.
I get it. I think one of the missing pieces is you choose your technology, you choose your community.
Yes,
And I think that it sounds kind of elitist, but I don't care. I think that when you choose a archaic language or antiquated language, you're choosing the type of people you're going to build it with in general.
true.
Because usually we speak in generalities because generalities typically forecast what's going to happen next based on history,
Yeah,
right? So if you pick Java or .NET and you take the average developers to work with, then you're going to see the types of results that are going to be average or maybe even below,
yeah.
versus taking some Clojure developers or some
Oh,
Haskell developers. I would argue that it's highly likely you're going to get different results
I
just
agree.
because they demonstrated that they're able to think in multiple paradigms. I've never ever heard of a Haskell developer only knowing Haskell. Never ever heard of a
True,
Clojure developer only knowing Clojure.
true,
Right?
true. But
So
but 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 the point I was getting at is, for me though, once that switch was made, once I had that realization that, oh, I, regardless of if I plan to be successful, whether as part of a company, whether as part of my own company, whatever, I have to learn to work with people. And learning to work with people scales your abilities. So if you're one good developer and you're able to influence 10 developers who are on the same frequency with you, you've become 10x, the so-called 10x
I,
developer.
I I I mean I agree with you. I guess what I'm saying is I'm throwing in a caveat or a constraint saying no, I don't want to just work with anybody. I want to work with people that have demonstrated a desire to improve their design and their solutioning, if that's a
Mm,
verb, right?
mm,
So it's not enough for you to know a general purpose programming language. I want you to demonstrate that you know a language that tends to excel in certain areas or thought processes of or domain modeling
mm,
so that it's a higher likelihood that you understand some of the issues that most developers don't understand, right?
mm.
When it comes to design or when it comes to certain philosophies and why that philosophy, although biased, tends to produce certain advantages,
I see.
right?
I see. No, in that case, I get what you're saying, and it does make sense. It does make sense because I'm thinking back. So I'm thinking back to situations where I was successful, both as a junior developer, as a senior developer, where I grew in my knowledge and understanding, right? It came because most of the people who were employed, most, not all, and this is a very important distinction, most of the people who were employed with me at the same time had the same level of um, what Linus Torvalds refers to as taste, right? The same level of strive for excellence. Because if that strive for excellence is not there, right, you will just be frustrated. It's like Steve Jobs used to say. He said A players only want to work with A players, right? And B players don't want to work with B players. They want to work with C players. And then C players want to work with D players. So you have this situation where if enough people in your organization are B players, the quality falls off a cliff because all the B players just want C players to work with them, and the C players don't even want B or A players. They just want D players, and all of a sudden your company is just filled with people that don't have any uh, uh, that aren't driven, that kind of a thing. So that kind of makes sense because even if you had, like I gave you the example of Cristiano Ronaldo, even if you had a mediocre team and you manage to hire someone who is of very, very high expectations, who operates on the highest level, you know, that friction is almost inevitable once that person joins the team,
Yeah,
and
you got to put them in an environment that contributed to why they perform at a high level.
exactly.
Yeah, to your point, and I think you've probably been in a similar position where like you require certain habits or a certain environment in order for you to do your best work.
Mm,
And if an employer doesn't provision or encourage that type of environment that enables you to do your best work, you're they're not going to get the results that they hired you for,
true,
right?
true.
So
And also, like I don't know if I can speak to my experience working at Amazon. Obviously, I don't speak for the company, but my experience has been that everybody is smart. So subconsciously, you are subconsciously, right? If you're in that kind of environment where people are operating on your level or higher, you are subconsciously trying to raise the bar because everybody gets it. So the moment we feel like, oh, we could do this thing better, right? Every other person on your team who is also operating at that level can see what you are seeing, right? And you get better because they even teach you things that you may not even know. Even if the person is a junior developer in quotes, right? The person's perspective on certain things, right, will be like, I didn't think of it that way. That makes sense. Okay, I've seen it this way, but maybe, that kind of a thing. So yeah, if you, I can imagine that, like you said, the environment is really, really important because if you are in a team where most of them are mediocre, they just want to clock in and, get their 9 to 5 stuff done, it will be almost impossible to to raise the standard in those companies because raising the standards is essentially looking for enemies. All right, man. Anyway, it's been over an hour, man. I don't know. Maybe we can uh postpone this conversation and let's see how it goes. First episode of Tech Conception, right? Thank you for watching to the end of this episode. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and let us know your feedback on some of the topics we discussed during the episode. We'd really like to hear from you. Make those comments in the comment section below. Bye.